head on, if you like, because a lot of assumptions that this is bottom up and it'll grow up through the organisation and people will eventually learn how to deal with it or whatever. But there's lots of organisations could really benefit from this stuff, but they'll ban it or try to avoid it because of those bigger governance type issues. You know?
So how do you do that currently, or how do you address that when you're inside an organisation and trying to get them to think at that sort of level?
Well, I personally think there's a kind of risk involved in getting too drawn into those conversations. I mean, we were talking about the enterprise language and enterprise systems and IT governance and all that kind of stuff, and the way that it's easy for people to dismiss these new things because they don't fit with that old model and are seen as being sub-professional or too risky to even engage with. But I think it's interesting to start to have conversations about, well, these things are going to happen anyway. How do you govern an organisation that's making the best use of them? So it's like change the model of how you govern an organisation. You know, because as we were saying, we both believe this is going to change how organisations work and how they see themselves. And to try and apply principles and practices that apply to the old way of doing things to the new is kind of nonsensical. But you know, the challenge is having that conversation in the first place. And that's why I think you're probably timing this about right, because having these, you know, getting people to even understand what these things were 2 or 3 years ago was challenging. Getting them to acknowledge that they exist and that they need to think about them is still challenging. Getting them to take them seriously enough to build them into their governance is a kind of different level of engagement. But you know, probably about right in terms of the timing.
So one of the other things you talked about was peer-to-peer across just about everything, and you mentioned the Gartner forecast that peer-to-peer finance would be 20% of all lending, and you know, just the idea that peer-to-peer models are applicable to, you know, you mentioned pharmaceutical developments, you know, and ultimately, you know, politics, the way organisations work. I mean, where do you see the peer-to-peer space going?
Well, it's interesting because it kind of means lots of different things to different people, and people kind of conflate open source with peer-to-peer and free with open space and open source rather. But I think, you know, for me, the peer-to-peer thing is the creative potential for collaboration. The fact that more people in more constructive ways working on more problems is a good thing. I think there's lots of different ways in which we're seeing it work more effectively than small groups or rigidly controlled approaches to things. And I think it can be applied to most problems.
Right, sorry about that, Euan, before you were so rudely interrupted. So peer-to-peer and where that is.
And I'm not sure which point in the conversation we got to, but you know, the fact that the way that peer-to-peer thinking makes people approach problems and seems to be so effective. I mean, there are lots of things to work out about it, and you know, the way that Wikipedia has had to introduce, you know, they're not uncontrolled environments, they're not completely self-organising environments. Somebody still has to intervene in ways that makes them more or less likely to work. But you're not managing them in a conventional sense. So I think there's a whole bunch of stuff to be worked out. And even down to language, you know, when we were doing the things at the BBC, I've tried to avoid using the word managing anything. It was about influencing things. And it's like, you know, Dave Snowden's thing about creating a knowledge ecology. You've got an environment where there are different types of interventions and different types of infrastructure that will produce, with a large degree of self-directed input, different outcomes. But that's maybe a mealy-mouthed way of saying it, but there's a whole different set of management skills that I think need to be applied to this stuff to make it work. And equally how you reward for it and how you monetize it. You know, that I don't doubt that this is the way the world's headed, but there's an awful lot of working out to still be done about how you pay for music or how you pay for television programmes, and you pay for all these other things, which are still wedded to the old models of how they're created and how they're distributed. So in other words, I don't doubt it's going to happen. I don't doubt that people are still going to get paid for doing good stuff, because we all want to keep doing it and we'll all recognise value in something that's been delivered to us at a quality. But the mechanisms to do that currently are unknown.
Anything else that we chatted about you think's worth recapitulating?
The sense that we both have that there is a long game. It's not a bubble. And also, for me, that it's not just about the technology. It's not just because we've got blogs and wikis that this stuff's happening. I think it's a general trend in how societies see themselves and how individuals relate to them. And we happen to have a cool set of tools just at the right time to make that easier.
Yeah, no, actually, and we're both talking about 5, 10 years and more for this to play out.
Skills, people expect this to happen.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Cool.
Fantastic to catch up with you.
Cheers.
See you.